Well, folks, we're back, and we made some progress with the generation of a stem blank here. You can see I took the entire acrylic rod that I had and turned that down to a cylinder. It might be zoomed a bit close here. Let me just... There we go. Yeah, so I turned that down to a cylinder and put a tenon on it using the tenon turning tool. Made sure that that was sized properly for our Delrin mortise here, and I made it long enough so that I can insert this this spacer that I've actually made out of hard maple. I wanted to use a light colored wood to sort of contrast a bit with the darker colors that are going to be coming through in this pipe, and you can see that all goes together nicely. Obviously the spacer is not cut to size yet. The way I'm going to do that is actually just taper it down, so this will make a transition between the slightly larger diameter Delrin and the smaller diameter acrylic. When that's all together, it has been drilled, and it will pass a pipe cleaner quite easily straight down into the bowl. So this is all looking very good now. So the next step is I'm going to turn this, so I'm actually going to take this whole thing off. And this is one of the reasons why, well, I say that now, it's jammed in there pretty tightly, but I will be able to get the whole thing off. And I will turn this as one piece. I can set it up between centers and compress it. I'm probably going to wind up taking just a tiny bit off of the end of the tenon here, because when I put it all together, it's just the fit on this is just a little bit loose, and I want to make sure that I have enough of a pressure fit there that I can turn it well. Also, I want there to be no gaps when things are complete. So I'm going to shave just a hair off of the end here, re-chamfer the end, I like to have that chamfered, and then put it all back together. We'll chuck that up on the lathe and turn this section so that it's making a nice ramping transition between these two pieces. And then when that's done, you see I've marked out a couple of reference points here. These are very rough, just guidelines, so there's no real measurement here. But that's, you know, about the as thin as I want to go on this before I start to think about careful shaping. So the button is going to lie somewhere between these two lines, and therefore the rest of the stem is going to lie somewhere between those two lines until it transitions up into the saddle here. So that's where I want the transition to be, and these two reference lines are just to show me about where the stem should be. Well, since the furnace is coming on and that's about all I needed to say, I'll cut off at this point, and I'll bring you back once I've got some rough shaping of the stem done. Okay, folks, just wanted to bring you in here one last time before doing the shaping, just to show you this transition detail that's now complete. So you can see I've just sort of put a little cove in here to better transition between the Delrin and the acrylic. And I think that looks nice. I think it'll look good on the pipe when it's all finished. And I just wanted to take a second to stress the importance of, if you're doing this work, or this kind of work, trying to keep everything round until the last possible minute, because it's very easy to go back on the lathe, make small adjustments, make transition pieces like this, or add extensions. As soon as this is no longer round, then you can't chuck it anymore, and it becomes a much more difficult process to make those kind of changes. So if you are doing this work on a lathe, try to keep that in mind. It's a useful tip, and actually it's a useful tip for any kind of lathe work. The longer you can keep it in the round, the easier it's going to be to work on. Okay, I'll be back with some shaping soon. Back for another quick update. So we've used this, used a sanding drum to start to profile this, bring it down on both sides, bring it down to about as narrow as I'm comfortable. I can show you, trying to keep that air hole centered, and I'm obviously going to have to do a bit more work on the bottom than the top at this point. But we're getting there. We're getting there. We've got the rough shape cut in now, and that is the extent of the work I'm going to do using any power tools at this point. So the next step now is to switch over to files and ultimately to the nail files and sandpaper, as I showed you when we were fitting the ebonite stem. But we'll be doing a bit more filing here because we've still got a lot of structure we need to build in here. You know, we need to fair these curves in, we need to narrow this down quite a bit more and form a comfortable button on the end of this. So that's going to take some time, and it's a lot of handwork, but it'll be worth it in the end. So I will work on that. I'll bring you back in maybe once I've got the button formed and have something a little bit more recognizable to show you. Okay folks, back for another quick update. The rough work is basically done at this point. You can see we've got the sort of blank, fully formed now. The button is in place, although certainly in a primitive form that we're going to have to work on quite a bit. I have reduced the thickness here to what I'm going to call the final thickness, because this is going to be a stubby, chunky bit. Got these curves faired in fairly well. A lot of hand sanding remains. I've done a little bit of work on easing the corners here where it's going to go into the mouth, but again, a lot of that will be hand sanding. So the next step is to get this button softened down, decrease it a little bit, trying to keep that edge as crisp as we can. We will have to widen out the air hole, which will be done with needle files, and funnel that out a bit. And then just lots and lots of hand sanding and polishing. So I will probably not update you again until this is completely finished. So we'll be back soon. Well, we're making some nice progress now. The stem is essentially done, and I'm about to call it a day, so I thought I would just give you a quick update and talk about the next few steps before I pack up. So the stem is essentially completed at this point. I've not made I've made some hand cut stems. I usually work on vulcanite. I haven't done a lot of work on acrylic, and I've also never made one that's quite this stubby. So I've made a few amateur mistakes here. I'm not going to point those out to you because well, I don't need to. But it's far from perfect. But you know, for what we're shooting for, I think this is going to be just fine. The one thing that I will show you is that if you remember, my air hole was a little bit off center when I started, and I said I had to try to fix that, and in fact I didn't do a very good job fixing it. You can see here I'm starting to cut into these stress lines that were created when the drill bit went through the acrylic. Now that's not going through, I can't feel that, it's just a discoloration in the acrylic, so I think it's safe. I don't think there's going to be any point where that's going to break or I'm going to chew through that or anything. But if this was a pipe for anyone other than myself, this would be thrown away right now and trashed, because that's just unsightly. I'll put it on the bottom. Nobody will know. I'll know, and I'll be the only one smoking it. But other than that, the stem has come out quite nicely. Now we do have to start to do some glue up here soon. But the next steps involve, well, first I've got to get that little bit of walnut extension that's in there out of there. And I'm going to try something. I'm not going to do this evening, but I'm going to try something a little daring. Since I know, I actually reamed this and then took out some more cob with this Forstner bit. This is a 3/4 inch Forstner bit. I know this will fit perfectly down into that bore. And I think I'm going to try to take this over to the drill press and just kind of tap out that extension. And this way it will be perfectly shaped to the inside. The other option would be to try to mark it off and then take it out and cut it. And just getting that curve right is going to be a little bit of a pain. So if this works, it'll be beautiful. If it doesn't work, I'll be making a new walnut piece tomorrow. So we'll give that a shot. Then the next thing I'm going to do is reduce the height of the cob, as I mentioned previously. I'm going to take it down to just about where that dark discoloration ends, right about there. I'll probably do that on a sander for the most part, and I'll collect up the sandings because I want to use that to make some epoxy fills around the edge. Oh, sorry, around the edge here where we had some chip out when we were insetting the walnut shank. So once that's brought down, I'm going to, with the shank removed, and this is why I don't want to do any glue up just yet, I will then stain this black. I'm going to stain the top, which will then be fresh cob. I'm going to stain that a light walnut to try to provide a tie-in between these 2 points. And then at that point, once the stain is dry, once everything's set, we will be ready to get this glued together. We use Titebond to glue the shank in place. Titebond's a common woodworking glue, and it should be more than enough in terms of heat resistance and moisture resistance to keep this in place, because it's a really tight pressure fit anyway. And then I'll use some epoxy to get the Delrin bonded to the walnut, and also to get this bit of hard maple bonded to the acrylic. And at that point, we will just need to do a little bit of buffing. By the way, the acrylic was buffed the same routine that you've seen me use with ebonite stems. So this is just using the micro mesh pads, and you can see it works quite well on acrylic as well. So there's really no need to have a buffing wheel for this kind of work. But I will buff the whole thing on the buffing wheel, put some carnauba over the cob, which I assume will take carnauba, and certainly over the walnut and everything else. I need to make sure that that's all buffed nicely. So we're getting there. You basically have the finished shape here, a little bit of reshaping going to happen up here, and some color changes. So when I bring you back, I think we will have a finished pipe. Okay folks, another quick update. We're getting very much to the end now. So what I've done since last you've seen the bits here is I have done the glue up on the parts of the shank and the stem. So the shank is still not glued into the cob, but everything else is now in its final form. Still need to do a little bit of cleanup and polishing on the stem, but you know, just the final buffing really. I haven't done any buffing on anything yet, so this is still kind of in its raw form. I did take down the top of the cob as I said I was going to. I think the proportions are better now. I also like the wider rim. I just think it fits the style of pipe a bit better. That is yet to be stained and will be stained dark walnut. I'm hoping the stain takes. I've never stained a corn cob before, so we'll see how that goes. I have sanded the exterior of this because it did have a bit of a lacquer or shellac finish, I'm not sure which, but I just sanded it lightly with 220 grit to break that, and then wiped it down with some alcohol. And I've done nothing on the bottom because I want to try to reserve or conserve the Missouri Meerschaum stamping there, so I'm just going to leave that as is. And also, where's my little flashlight here? I did use that Forstner bit trick, and it worked quite well. So I was able to get the shank right up against the edge quite nicely. So in the future, when I'm working on Country Gentleman, I will just use the 3/4 Forstner bit to drill out the tobacco chamber, make it a little bit wider, and at the same time remove that shank all in one pass. So that's quite a neat little trick, and it worked very well. So we got a nice open draw there. Okay, so next steps then, final steps really. I'm going to do some patching on this. There was some chip out around the edges I've mentioned. Once that's done, I'll do the staining, and I'm not going to show you. You've seen staining before. I'm just going to put it on, wipe it off with a bit of alcohol, and then just do some final finishing, and we will be done. So this should be the last time you see the pipe before it is finished. Be back soon. Well, folks, we're back with the finished pipe. And it's finished for the purpose of these videos. I'm still probably going to do a few tweaks, and I'll tell you about those as we go along. But yeah, I think we've accomplished the goal for the most part. So we have cut the bowl down to size, and we now have this nice broad rim. The rim didn't take stain too well. It still has that sort of yellowish cob look to it, although there are some spots where the walnut came up nicely. I think the effect is fine. It at least has the lighter contrasting colors in both the shank and the rim. We did the bowl itself in black. This is stained black, and I also put a very light coat of shellac over top of the stain just to sort of set it and protect it as we were buffing, and prevent it from coming off on the hands or stuff, because normally I would sand the stain back a bit, and but with the cob I just don't know how well it's setting, so that was more of a precautionary measure than anything, and it seems to have worked perfectly fine. the shank looks good. There are some issues with the staining that I'll get to in a minute. And then we've already talked quite a bit about the stem, and I think the overall flow of that is rather nice. So I'm quite happy. I did do some pipe mud in the bottom and brought the draft hole in right in the center of the bowl. So this should be pretty much ready to smoke, and I'm looking forward to giving it a try, although I'm probably going to do a bit more work on it before I do smoke it. So I would like to enter this in the Cobfoolery contest, which runs through April. So I still have some time to tweak this a bit. And there's a couple of things that bother me about this. One is the stem. I've already talked about some of the issues with the stem, and I'm just not really happy with the way it came out, cosmetically or in terms of just the quality. So I think I need to make a new stem before I would enter this, or before I feel comfortable entering it in a contest. I do have a large piece of this material remaining, so I could easily make another one. I've also got some other blanks that I could use. And the truth is, the only way to get good at making stems is to make stems. So it's practice, and I will very likely do that. On the shank, I ran into some trouble, and you can kind of see this right in here, where the stain, although I was very careful not to get the stain on the walnut, what appears to have happened right here at the junction between the cob and the walnut shank is it appears that some of the stain actually got below, it probably got down into that fill material that I was using, and then actually got into the end grain of the walnut and came up. So unfortunately, that's, it's kind of marring it a bit. It's making it a bit ugly in my opinion. And that is not something that is going to be sandable. I'm not going to be able to sand that out because it's not on the surface. It's actually deep in the wood, coming up through the end grain. I've got some thoughts on how to prevent that from happening in the future, or avoid it. But in terms of how to fix it, I'm kind of at a loss. I've tried I've had a few thoughts. I don't want to just put another black band in there because that's going to wind up really minimizing the effect of the walnut. What I think I'm going to do is strip the finish off of this and go ahead and do a black contrast stain on this. So I'll put a light black stain on, then sand it off, and then refinish it. And hopefully what that will do is it will just extend the staining throughout the whole walnut. It'll darken up the grain a bit, but it will hopefully mask that sort of ugliness that's happening right there around the junction. The other thing that I'm somewhat unhappy with is this maple band, because of the way I turned this, and this was a wood turning mistake and not one that most of you would have noticed, but the piece of wood that I had was just not the right grain orientation for turning, and what I've wound up with are some spots here where we've got end grain showing, and while it may not pick up very well on the camera, what that's doing is it's sort of putting a discoloration into parts of the band. So rather than being a nice white, there are areas there that are sort of a tannish yellow. And that's unfortunate because I also didn't pay attention to the orientation when I glued it up, so they happen to be right on the top and on the bottom. So, not the best choice of orientation for a flaw like that. The way to fix that is to either use a piece of wood that can be turned on only long grain surfaces. I could have taken this wood, which was just a slab of walnut, so I didn't have the ability to cut a piece that could be turned that way. But I could have segmented it so only the long grain would be showing, or find another material. So I will, if I remake the stem, obviously I'm going to have to remake this junctional piece here, and I will probably choose a different material to make that out of, just to avoid that effect. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with it. I think it certainly is a smokable pipe. And I learned an awful lot doing this. I hope you did as well. I mean, this was the first major cob renovation that I've ever done, and it was interesting and very informative process. So I think I will be doing more of these in the future. I actually just today got in a shipment from Steve Norse of another. This is actually a stem blank, so it's thicker than the pen blanks that I've been using, and that's nice. This is a tiger blank. So interesting material. By the way, I don't really like acrylic stems on briar pipe, but for some reason I like the idea of them on these cob modifications. Just add some color. And I also got this piece of bamboo, which God only knows what I'm going to do with that, but it was sitting there and I couldn't turn it down. So, I think future cob modifications might be on the way, and I may be using some of these items in those to try to come up with something interesting. So anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed the whole cob series. I had a great deal of fun making it, and as I said, I've learned a heck of a lot making this particular pipe. I need a name for the pipe, so if anybody has a name, please put it in the comments. I desperately need a name if I'm going to enter this in the Cobfoolery contest. So let me know what you think, and like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. To those of you that are subscribers, thank you, and thank you for everyone that's watching and that has commented on these videos. I really appreciate all that. So with that, I know these have been some long videos. I hope it's been worthwhile for you, and I appreciate you sticking with me through the length. So I will cut it short. Well, not short. I will cut it long here, and just say thanks again. Take care. And I will look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye now.